49. The last president inaugurated in the United States. The span of terrible days after the global comms blackout when the world was reshaped. The number of strange supernatural phenomena that appear around the globe. You're listening to The 49, the new series by Andrew Kooman. Get the content right in your inbox when you subscribe at the49.substack.com. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Welcome to the world of The 49.
The outboard motor stopped, and the world around him went quiet. He bobbed in the water and looked around. At another time, in other circumstances, this was the only place he'd want to be, alone, in the sanctuary of nature. So his thoughts could slowly leave his mind and body, sit stoically, and let the wonder of and quiet of creation defragment his mind. But he didn't have that option. He grabbed the paddles and started to row. The governor and his eyes in the sky were watching, and they had remote control of the boat's engine. They weren't willing to use any of their tech within 2 miles of the spot they predicted the falls may be. The governor and his team decided they were only willing to put him within a few nautical miles. He was frustrated and impressed. They took the lessons of the humbling to heart. They weren't going to risk their millions of dollars in tech on triggering another humiliation. He had to laugh at the quiet message it conveyed. They valued their drones and boat motors more than him. Look at the birds of the air. Are you not much more valuable than they? The homily wrote itself. Dees kept rowing. Behind him, in the direction he rowed, was the long stretch of Vancouver Island. From up close, when he checked over his shoulder, it looked like the curve of the spine of a humpback as it came for air, then slowly curled back to the deep. The boat they sent him on was speedy. The distance between the points of the 2 islands he launched his boat at was just under 35 nautical miles. Whatever the electric motor had under its carbon fiber sleeve was impressive. He skipped over the water like a rock, hitting speeds over 20 knots. But the lesson they learned from the humbling was you couldn't get too close. Because they had all his biometric data from the ring he wore, which tracked his health metrics, they estimated that if he pushed, he could row to the shore in just under an hour. But Diaz didn't want to rush. He wasn't in a race. He would get there when he got there. He would keep an open hand and heart to the outcome. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps, or their paddles. He couldn't help himself. Whenever he was on water or on a nature path, the empty cistern of his inward self got filled. It could be the shape of leaves on an upturned branch or the sound of a loon's call from the shore. Nature turned the inward dial so that his soul attuned to the divine, and words poured in like so much life-giving water. As his paddles disappeared under the surface of the water and he pulled the fiberglass handles into his chest, he tried to discern what was at play. What purpose did the corridor have with him, here and now? He faced the island of San Juan, which was a green rim in the distance. Before the blackout, this was the type of trip tourists paid a fortune for. A day trip to Victoria, to cross the invisible jagged line of the 49th parallel from San Juan. The zigzag of the boundary line took sharp turns on the map through the hundreds of little islands of the archipelago toward the Salish Sea. The crossing to Victoria allowed a day of international travel in one afternoon, from the USA to Canada, with the climax being the view from the Malahat Summit, where families could eat ice cream on the famous spiral tower and snap a selfie of the channel and Mount Baker in the background, which stood steadfast, back home on U.S. soil. The view on a clear day, like this one, was stunning. As a child, with his father, he had once made the trip. There were no selfies to prove it, but he still remembered the song, then sang together, quietly, as the tour boat pushed through the channel. My paddles clear and bright, flashing with silver. The thought of his father, the world before, of the life he lived, and the memories set inside them, belonged to another person he didn't recognize, a man who could no longer be reached, as though an invisible, powerful wall that cut out all communication had been placed like a force field between them. No modern tool could access that past, recreate its magnificence, or tap its mysteries. The memory of his father stopped the rhythm of his rows. He rested the paddles on the boat's edge. Follow the wild goose flight, dip, dip, and swing. The lines of the traditional song that his father taught him as they crossed the channel, penetrated the invisible force field for a moment. Diaz leaned over in the boat as if struck by an arrow in the heart. Grief and joy seemed to impale him. The moment from his past that slipped through was a gift. To remember a time when he was completely unself-conscious, unafraid, was a good hurt. Diaz, come in. What's your status? The woman's voice from command slapped him back to reality. He looked at the drops falling to the surface of the water from the stationary paddles. Your blood pressure and heart rate just spiked before your boat suddenly stopped. What's your status? Diaz grabbed the paddles and started to move again. I'm fine. Just needed a break. I know you probably want to look around. Take it all in. The governor's voice. But you'll have to put aside your love of nature and keep moving. You're missing something spectacular, Diaz said. I saw a pod of orcas a few minutes ago. They probably haven't seen a human in a while. We saw them too. We have a submarine nearby that can intervene if they get hungry, the governor replied. He was probably serious. Can you report any signs of the phenomenon on the shores? The woman asked, done with their banter. You pointed me in the wrong direction. Every time I shoulder check, I lose momentum. We'll get you to a masseuse after all this, the governor said. Nothing yet, and no sensations of it either. Just burning in my lower back and shoulders from all the rowing. You're on pace to reach the shore in 20, the woman said. We have another hour of daylight. Roger that. I'm going as fast as I can. We have satellites and drones with eyes on you. We'll watch you closely. The governor interjected. All these chat bros who talk about the surveillance state are right, aren't they? Diaz ribbed. Safety first, the governor replied. What are you seeing on the land from the sky? Diaz asked. If you've got eyes everywhere, what am I doing out here breaking my back? There's a blackout, with a radius of approximately 1 mile, that we have no ability to penetrate. You will be our eyes. The comms went silent for a moment. Okay, we're gonna go dark now. They're telling me that our dialogue is slowing you down. Keep moving. We're here. For now. If you need us. Diaz returned to the rhythm of rowing, his arms stretching out in front of him, his shoulders snapping back. There was satisfaction in the repetition. The strain of his muscles clarified his mind, and the fresh air awakened a state of reflection. The old boundary lines were gone. The remade world highlighted how much of a construct the maps men made were in the first place. The waters he floated on, the land he approached, had its own history of claims and temporary dominations. We plant a flag, we created a border. We let people in and out, Diaz thought. Tax and control, liberate and extract, dominate the land, make it into something. The governor knew, as well as Diaz, that if heaven decided to touch earth on the island Diaz paddled toward, or anywhere else, there was nothing he could do to control it. Feneros. It was the word he mulled with each pull of the row, the closer he got to shore, to make manifest. This was the most difficult thing for people to come to terms with, especially the men and women who held the keys to the walled corridors. They'd found a way to survive. And somehow, they had salvaged a post-nuclear society and made it work, not only keeping the lights on, but pulling the shattered social order from oblivion to find a new working order was astonishing, even commendable. It resulted from willfulness, innovation, the ingenious use of tech interfaced with the natural law. To have something supernatural so clearly enter time was not in their frame of reference. There was always talk of miracles, the unknown. Paranormal activity was a fascination of the fringe. For all of human history, eternity had stepped into time in profound moments where God touched humanity, walked in the garden, sat down, and grilled fish on the beach, healed and touched the brokenness of man. But for heaven to come down and remain in geographical regions for such a sustained period of time was terrifying to everyone. The bottom of the boat scraped a rock. Diaz shook out of his thoughts and lifted his paddle. He was a stone's throw from the shore. I'm here, he said into the comms. There was no response. Diaz to command center. Do you read me? Nothing. He looked at the watch the governor's team had given him. It gave multiple biometric readings, his location, maps. A black screen reflected his face. It, too, was dead. Well, "Something's up," he said as the nose of the boat touched the pebbled shore. He jumped out onto the rocks and hauled the boat up onto the beach. Gulls on nearby rocks stared at him, but otherwise stood still. He grabbed the pack and pulled out a bottle of water. He felt no physical sensation on his body, other than the strain of the rowing on his legs, chest, and arms. There was no cold sensation, no tingling, no burning on his extremities, and no cool rush of wind over his face or fingertips, which were often the first physical sensations one felt when they were in the glory associated with a Foz. He emptied the bottle of water and tossed it in the boat. He didn't need to carry anything but what was in the pack. His back was to the shore, but he felt the presence on the rocks behind him. It had slipped out of the shadows in the trees that lined the shore. He slowly turned toward the presence, palms out. When he turned, his heart stopped. A grizzly bear stood on its hind legs, sniffing the air.
Thanks for listening to this portion of The 49 by Andrew Kooman. New content drops for paid subscribers every Monday at the49.substack.com. That's the49.substack.com. On Tuesdays, we release new audio on all your favorite podcast platforms. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe and to share it with a friend. Thanks for listening to The 49.